Hold up, because this story took a wild turn. Katt Williams recently appeared on camera and made a bold claim, suggesting that some rappers who rap like they've lived behind bars, despite never doing time, are actually protected by the system. Then things escalated even further when old clips and allegations involving Rick Ross started making the rounds again, and this time the conversation even touched on claims involving minors. So what really sparked all of this? Let's break it down. Katt Williams has been on an unbelievable run ever since his explosive January 2024 appearance on Club Shay Shay with Shannon Sharpe. That interview crossed more than 64 million YouTube views and completely changed the conversation around exposing powerful names in entertainment. During that sit-down, Katt openly criticized Steve Harvey, Kevin Hart, Cedric the Entertainer, Ludacris, Tiffany Haddish, Ricky Smiley, and several others without holding anything back. He delivered every statement with a calm smile, making it look effortless while the internet exploded around him. But the quote that refuses to disappear actually came from a different interview altogether. This time, the conversation wasn't about comedy, it was about hip-hop and the image many rappers sell. When Katt was asked about the gap between rap lyrics and real life, he didn't hesitate for even a second. Instead of softening his words, he doubled down and said what many people are afraid to say publicly. The interviewer even gave him another chance to clarify, but Katt never backed away from his position. He repeated that exposing informants is simply part of the process, speaking with the confidence of someone who's believed this for years. That single statement immediately shifted the conversation. Suddenly, fans began questioning whether some of the biggest rap stars were really who they claimed to be. The interesting part is that Katt never mentioned a single rapper by name. He didn't have to. Within hours, social media users started digging through old interviews, documents, photos, and forgotten stories all on their own. And one name kept appearing over and over again: Rick Ross. Now, it's important to separate facts from speculation. Katt Williams never publicly called Rick Ross a federal informant by name, even though plenty of headlines have blurred that distinction. His comments were aimed at the industry as a whole. Still, many people immediately connected those remarks to Rick Ross because questions about his past have followed him for nearly 2 decades. The reason those rumors refuse to disappear is because they're tied to documented records: an old photograph in a correctional officer uniform, official Florida paperwork, and years of public denials that many critics believe were contradicted by later evidence. Whether people agree with those conclusions or not, that's why Ross continues to be pulled into conversations like this. Katt has also hinted that he's been inside circles where many entertainers would do anything to gain access. According to him, he chose to walk away instead. During that same interview with Shannon Sharpe, Katt described sitting outside exclusive Hollywood Hills parties and watching people leave looking completely different than when they arrived. That story quickly went viral because it added even more mystery to everything else he had already revealed. So when fans started connecting those comments with Rick Ross's past, they began asking an even bigger question.
If one of rap's biggest bosses once wore a correctional officer's badge, handled inmate paperwork, and later denied it for years, what does that say about the image being sold to the public? To understand why this debate still exists today, we have to go back before platinum albums, before the luxury lifestyle, and before the Maybach music empire. We have to revisit the job Rick Ross reportedly held before becoming a rap superstar. That's where this entire controversy really begins. And this is the file that changed everything. Back in July 2008, a photo suddenly started spreading across early hip-hop blogs. The image showed a young black man wearing what appeared to be a beige correctional officer uniform, and many people immediately claimed the man looked exactly like Rick Ross. At that point, Ross was already one of the biggest artists in hip-hop. Both Port of Miami and Trilla had reached #1 on the Billboard 200, and his entire image was built around being a larger-than-life street boss. As soon as the picture went viral, Rick Ross strongly denied it. He insisted his story was authentic and claimed internet users had digitally placed his face onto someone else's body. He repeated that explanation during radio appearances and interviews, arguing the photo was fake and accusing critics of trying to damage his reputation. For a moment, some people believed him. Then everything changed. A website known for obtaining court records, mugshots, and official government documents decided to investigate the claims for itself. On July 21, 2008, it published a report that many people believe permanently changed the conversation surrounding Rick Ross's past. And that's where this story takes its biggest turn. That report changed everything. According to the publication, official Florida Department of Corrections records identified William Leonard Roberts II, the legal name of Rick Ross, as having served as a correctional officer. The documents stated he was hired in December 1995 with a starting salary of $22,913.54. They also reportedly matched identifying information connected to him, making the earlier denial much harder for many people to accept. Even after those records surfaced, Ross continued denying the story. A week later, the publication released what it described as his complete personnel file, adding even more detail to the timeline. According to those documents, he didn't work there for only a few months. He reportedly remained employed for about 18 months. The records placed him at the South Florida Reception Center in Miami-Dade County, where inmates are processed before being assigned to permanent correctional facilities. The file also included paperwork recognizing him for perfect attendance during one period in 1996. That detail caught many fans off guard because it seemed completely different from the image Ross had built in his music. Despite the growing attention, he avoided speaking publicly about the issue for quite some time. Interviews came and went, but the subject was largely left untouched. Then, in 2009, Ross finally addressed the controversy during an interview with XSL. He acknowledged that the photograph was real and admitted he had worked as a correctional officer, but explained that he was simply doing what he needed to do at that stage of his life. He argued that the job didn't define who he would eventually become. Even so, many critics felt his explanation still left important questions unanswered. One reason the debate continued is because his comments didn't fully address the length of his employment. Some listeners were left with the impression that it had only been a brief stop before music took over. For years, that version of the story remained largely accepted by much of the hip-hop community. But then another interview reignited the entire conversation. During a 2022 appearance on the Full Send podcast, Ross described the job very differently. He suggested he had only been there for around 4 months, joked that he was often late, and implied he barely made it through the training process. He treated the story casually, almost like it was no big deal. That version immediately caught people's attention because it appeared to conflict with the earlier public records. Those older documents, which had been
circulating since 2008, described a much longer period of employment and included records recognizing perfect attendance during part of that time. They also listed a resignation date of June 2, 1997, adding another specific detail to the timeline. Whether intentional or not, the two versions of the story didn't line up, and fans quickly noticed. That inconsistency became a major talking point online. By 2024, those old records were making the rounds again. As Rick Ross became involved in new public feuds, internet users revisited the uniform photo, the reported salary, the resignation paperwork, the attendance certificate, and the employment timeline. Everything was only a few clicks away for anyone willing to search. Every fresh controversy seemed to send people right back to those same documents. This is also why so many people connected Katt Williams' broader comments to Rick Ross, even though Katt never mentioned him directly. Katt argued that audiences should question artists whose public image doesn't match their real-life history. Many online interpreted Ross as one example because of the long-running debate surrounding his background. Whether fair or not, that's how those two conversations became linked. The controversy became even more famous because of one person, 50 Cent. Although the documents had already been published in 2008, it was 50's relentless campaign that turned Officer Ricky into one of hip-hop's most recognizable nicknames. Their rivalry reportedly began after an uncomfortable encounter at the 2008 BET Awards. Before long, that tension had evolved into one of rap's biggest feuds. Rick Ross fired one of the first major shots with the track Mafia Music, where he referenced issues connected to 50 Cent's personal life. But anyone familiar with hip-hop history knows 50 rarely lets a diss slide without responding. His comeback came quickly, and it completely shifted the narrative. That's when Officer Ricky became a permanent part of the conversation. 50 didn't stop with just one song. He expanded the campaign through parody videos, animated skits, online content, and repeated references to Ross's reported correctional officer past. The feud spilled far beyond music and turned into a non-stop battle for public opinion. It became one of the most talked-about rivalries of that era. Looking back, one part of 50 Cent's strategy stands out more than anything else. Beyond the jokes and the personal attacks, he repeatedly questioned whether Ross's former law enforcement role changed how people should view his credibility. Years later, during a 2015 interview with Tim Westwood, 50 repeated those same criticisms. He suggested that someone who once took an oath as a correctional officer should be viewed differently, leaving fans to debate his comments for themselves. One thing that's important to point out is this. Despite years of rumors, Rick Ross has never been formally accused in any public court filing of being a federal informant. No government agency has publicly labeled him as one, and no official legal document makes that claim. But once 50 Cent introduced that narrative during their feud, it took on a life of its own. From that point forward, the allegation kept resurfacing every time the two exchanged shots. Year after year, the rivalry kept breathing new life into the same conversation. Every diss track, every social media jab, and every interview seemed to bring the Officer Ricky nickname right back into the spotlight. By the time their feud stretched into its 17th year in 2025, the label had become almost impossible to separate from Rick Ross's public image. Whether fans believed it or not, the nickname had become part of hip-hop history. What's even more surprising is that the feud never truly ended. As recently as 2025, Ross and 50 Cent were still firing shots at each other online. Ross joked about confronting 50 with an expensive ring, while 50 mocked Ross over the altercation at Vancouver's Ignite Music Festival in 2024 after Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us played during Ross's performance. Then came the usual jokes about Ross's appearance, lifestyle, wealth, and everything in between. Every new exchange had the same effect. It pushed fans back toward the old correctional officer records. A whole new generation of rap listeners discovered the same documents that older fans had already debated for years. That's why this story never really disappeared. It simply kept finding new audiences. Around that same period, Ross reportedly tried to respond by bringing up Daphne Joy, the mother of 50 Cent's son, as their feud escalated. But another name unexpectedly entered the conversation: Freeway Rick Ross, the former Los Angeles drug trafficker whose identity inspired the rapper's stage name. His comments immediately grabbed attention. Suddenly, an entirely different chapter of the story was back in the headlines. During a June 2024 appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, Freeway Rick Ross claimed the rapper had avoided meeting him for years. He also said he had received letters from former inmates who claimed to have encountered William Roberts during his correctional officer days. Those accounts included negative personal allegations, including accusations that Ross improperly handled inmates' money and belongings during games. These are claims that have circulated publicly but have not been established in court. Through all of these controversies, Rick Ross has largely responded the same way. Instead of constantly defending himself, he has continued releasing music, expanding his businesses, and building one of hip-hop's longest-lasting careers. Many artists might have struggled under that level of scrutiny, yet Ross somehow kept growing his brand. In a strange way, what was once viewed as a liability eventually became part of his public identity. Then another major challenge arrived in 2024. This time, it wasn't just 50 Cent bringing up the old records. Drake entered the picture during one of the biggest rap battles in recent memory, while internet personalities such as 1090 Jake helped recirculate years-old documents to millions of new viewers. Suddenly, an old controversy felt brand new again. By April 2024, the rap industry had split into competing sides after Kendrick Lamar's verse on Future and Metro Boomin's Like That. The verse wasn't simply aimed at Drake, it questioned his standing alongside Kendrick and J. Cole. Overnight, nearly every major artist was forced to choose where they stood. Rick Ross publicly aligned himself against Drake. Drake answered the way fans expected, with music. On April 13, 2024, his diss track Push-Ups leaked online, taking aim at Kendrick Lamar, Future, Metro Boomin, The Weeknd, and several others. Rick Ross wasn't spared either. Even though Ross only received a few bars, those lines quickly became some of the most discussed parts of the record. One lyric stood out above the rest when Drake rapped about cuffing Ross's girlfriend, like on Ricky. The bar worked as a double meaning, referencing both relationships and the long-running correctional officer narrative surrounding Ross's past. It was a clever play on words that instantly reignited old debates. Social media wasted no time connecting the lyric to the documents that had been circulating for years. Drake didn't stop there. He also suggested Ross's biggest chart successes came through their collaborations, criticized his age, and implied he should stay out of conflicts involving younger artists. Ross wasted almost no time responding. Within hours, he released his own diss record titled Champagne Moments. On Champagne Moments, Ross fired back with personal attacks of his own. He accused Drake of cosmetic surgery, questioned his authenticity, referenced Lil Wayne's influence, and repeatedly mocked Drake's image. The exchange quickly became one of the biggest talking points in the ongoing rap war. But the music wasn't the only thing fueling the battle anymore. Online investigators were now digging through years of public records. One of the most visible voices was YouTuber and Instagram personality 1090 Jake, who reposted documents that had originally surfaced back in 2008. By sharing them across modern social media platforms, he introduced the controversy to millions of younger fans who had never seen those files before. The story suddenly had a second life. Jake highlighted documents showing the reported hiring date, resignation paperwork, and attendance records, placing them alongside Ross's later interview where he described working only a few months. Instead of making lengthy arguments, he simply presented both versions side by side and let viewers compare them for themselves. That approach spread rapidly across social media. Once again, the Officer Ricky file became one of the biggest discussions in hip-hop. Back in 2008, Ross eventually moved past the controversy and continued building his career. But when those same records resurfaced during the explosive Drake-Kendrick conflict in 2024, they carried far more impact because they became part of an active rap war. Suddenly, Drake's Push-Ups lyric had an entirely new layer of context attached to it. A nearly two-decade-old controversy was front-page news all over again. Ross eventually responded by turning his attention toward 1090 Jake, accusing him of being a rat while bringing up Jake's own legal paperwork. Instead of ending the discussion, however, the exchange only added another chapter to an already complicated story. And that's exactly why this controversy refuses to disappear. Every new feud seems to reopen the same old file. Here's where the irony really kicks in. Every time Rick Ross fired back at Drake, critics immediately responded by reposting the same correctional officer records that had followed him for years. Instead of shifting the conversation, each new diss seemed to send fans right back to the old paperwork. The more Ross defended himself, the more the file became part of the discussion. Then another familiar voice entered the battle. In May 2024, The Game released a diss track titled Freeway's Revenge, and he also referenced Ross's correctional officer past while questioning parts of the image Ross had built throughout his career. Unlike his quick response to Drake, Ross didn't answer with another song this time. Instead, he posted a few messages on Instagram before choosing not to continue the musical back and forth. Later, during an appearance on Shannon Sharpe's Nightcap Summer Sessions, Ross explained that his silence was intentional. According to him, not responding can sometimes say more than any diss track ever could. But by then, public attention had already shifted back to the old records. Once again, paperwork that had existed for decades was dominating conversations across hip-hop. That also brought back one of the questions 50 Cent had been raising since 2009. He repeatedly challenged Ross's credibility by pointing to his former law enforcement employment and suggesting fans should think about what that history meant. Those comments were opinions rather than proven facts, but they continued circulating every time the controversy resurfaced. And that's exactly why the debate refuses to disappear. Now here's where the conversation becomes even more complicated. By 2024, the focus wasn't only on Rick Ross himself. It had expanded to include the people around him, the artists he collaborated with, and the circles he had moved in for years. Fans weren't just analyzing Ross anymore, they were looking at his entire network. This is also why many people began mentioning Katt Williams and Rick Ross in the same conversations, even though Katt never directly accused Ross of the claims circulating online. The connection came from broader discussions about authenticity, influence, and who artists choose to associate with. Ross has maintained long-standing friendships with numerous major figures in entertainment, many of whom have appeared alongside him publicly over the years. Those relationships naturally became part of the online speculation. One example often brought up is Ross's lavish birthday celebration at his Georgia estate back in January 2016. The event attracted a long list of celebrities, and photographs from the party show Katt Williams among the guests. That doesn't prove any larger theory by itself, but internet detectives frequently point to moments like these when building narratives. It's one reason old photos continue resurfacing whenever new controversies emerge. Beyond those conversations, Ross has also dealt with several unrelated legal and financial issues throughout his career. Public reports have documented disputes with the IRS over unpaid
taxes dating back to the early 2010s, including tax liens and settlements involving significant amounts of money. Despite those financial challenges, Ross continued expanding his music career and business ventures. Many fans viewed that resilience as part of his success story. Then there's the long-running dispute over his stage name. In 2010, Freeway Rick Ross filed a lawsuit claiming the rapper had used his name and identity without permission. Although the lawsuit was ultimately dismissed, the debate over the name never completely faded away. Even today, Freeway Rick Ross continues discussing the issue during interviews and podcast appearances. According to Freeway Rick Ross, the rapper borrowed not only his name, but also elements of his reputation and life story. He has repeatedly claimed that Rick Ross avoided meeting him whenever they happened to be at the same events or venues. Those are allegations made by Freeway Rick Ross and remain part of his public position. Whether fans agree or disagree, those claims continue fueling discussion years later. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, the questions become larger than any single controversy. If an artist builds a career around an identity that some critics argue isn't entirely authentic, it's understandable why audiences keep revisiting old stories. That's part of what has kept this debate alive for so many years. Every new headline sends people back to the beginning. Ross has also faced several health-related headlines throughout his career. He suffered seizures aboard a flight in 2011 and experienced another serious medical emergency in 2018 that resulted in hospitalization. Reports surrounding his health, weight, and lifestyle generated widespread media attention at the time. Those stories became another chapter in his already eventful public life. More recently, Ross found himself making headlines again after an altercation during the Ignite Music Festival in Vancouver in 2024, where a confrontation reportedly broke out while Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us played during his performance. The incident quickly spread across social media and added yet another unexpected moment to an already controversial year. Fair or unfair, it reinforced the idea that every chapter of Rick Ross's career seems to arrive with another major headline. And that's exactly why his story continues to spark debate long after each controversy fades. And after everything that's happened over the years, one thing has never changed. Every major controversy seems to bring the exact same records back into the spotlight: the correctional officer paperwork, the reported 18-month employment, the uniform photo, the perfect attendance certificate, and the resignation documents. No matter how much time passes, those records keep resurfacing. Every new feud seems to send people right back to the same conversation. Whether it's a diss track, an Instagram argument, or another headline, someone always reposts those old documents. That's become part of Rick Ross's story, whether he likes it or not. The internet has a long memory, and fans rarely let old controversies stay buried. That's why this debate keeps repeating itself. Now let's be fair here, because this is where context actually matters. Titles like The Terrifying Truth About Rick Ross naturally grab attention, but Katt Williams never directly accused Rick Ross by name in the clip that's been circulating online. His comments were broader and focused on what he believes about certain parts of the rap industry. That's an important distinction people often leave out. What Katt actually said was that, in his opinion, some rappers who portray prison life despite never living it should raise questions. He presented that as a general observation rather than pointing at one specific artist. The internet was the one that started connecting those comments to Rick Ross, and once that happened, the old paperwork immediately became part of the conversation again. It's also important to separate what the public records reportedly show from what many online rumors claim. The available documents indicate that William Leonard Roberts II worked as a Florida correctional officer for roughly 18 months between December 1995 and June 1997. They identify him as a state correctional officer, not a federal agent. Those are two completely different roles. Just as importantly, those records do not publicly show that Rick Ross worked as a federal informant, testified against anyone, or secretly cooperated with federal investigators. Those are separate allegations that have circulated online over the years, but they are not established by the publicly available employment documents themselves. Mixing those issues together only creates more confusion. Facts and speculation shouldn't be treated as the same thing. So what can actually be stated based on publicly available information? Rick Ross acknowledged that he worked as a correctional officer after initially denying it for years. Critics have also pointed out that his later descriptions of the job appeared shorter than the timeline reflected in the public records. Those facts have repeatedly been used against him during rap feuds, stretching from 50 Cent's campaign to Drake's 2024 diss tracks. Beyond that, Rick Ross also built his rap identity using the name of the real Freeway Rick Ross, which later became the subject of a legal dispute. Throughout his career, he's dealt with lawsuits, arrests, financial issues, public criticism, and countless controversies. Yet despite all of that, his career has continued to thrive. That's a reality that surprises a lot of people. Whether Rick Ross is exactly who critics claim he is, or whether he's simply become an easy target during rap beefs, is ultimately something outsiders can't definitively answer. What we do know is that the public records exist, the legal disputes happened, and many of his rivals have repeatedly used those issues as ammunition. Those are documented parts of his career. Everything beyond that enters the territory of opinion and interpretation. At the end of the day, that's probably why Katt Williams' comments continue going viral. Even without naming Rick Ross directly, many fans felt his remarks echoed controversies that have surrounded Ross for years. Every time those clips resurface, the old documents start circulating all over again. And through every controversy, every headline, and every rap war, Rick Ross continues doing the one thing he's always done, making music while the debate around his past refuses to disappear.